the keyboard to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports Podcast. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love. Thank you for all the 5-star ratings and reviews. If you haven't yet, go leave a review on the podcast. Go hit subscribe to the podcast. Maybe share it with your friends. That's how others help. That's how you help others find the podcast. And we appreciate it. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to tune in Wednesday nights. Jimmy has mentioned it. I'll mention it every Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. We do a live stream. It's a lot of fun. We cover a bunch of news from the gaming and esports industries. It's a bigger cast. And best of all, we get to do it live with you guys. So make sure to tune into that every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, everywhere you get Business of Esports content. Jimmy, how you doing this week?
What an intro, Paul. Wow. I'm doing great this week. Happy to be back as always. I was in GDC, as everyone knows, last week in San Francisco. Awesome event. I read that the numbers were quite down from the pre-COVID year. Honestly couldn't tell. It was so busy. It was so lively. I am so exhausted still, even though we're a week out. But happy to be in my usual setup. Hopefully my mic and audio quality sounds great. And yeah, ready to get things rolling. How are you doing, Paul?
You mentioned conferences. I will tease. We do have some. You will see the Prophet and the judge himself in person coming up soon. PAX East is confirmed. So I will be speaking at PAX East. In fact, we'll be doing a live Business of Esports podcast from PAX East, which should be a lot of fun, and maybe relevant to fewer people, but I will be speaking at Crypto Bahamas. So the SALT conference, FTX SALT in the Bahamas, also at the end of April.
How convenient.
So if you just can't get enough of the Prophet, there's a lot of ways other than just tuning into this podcast, which you should be doing anyways, but a lot of other ways. This means, you know what it means, Jimmy? I've had absolutely zero time to try Fortnite with no building, and I'm actually really upset at myself about it because I've been waiting for this to happen.
We got to talk about this,
and I have not played it. Please tell me you've played it and you love it.
You know, we've been so busy here at Business of Esports and at Holodeck. I finally got time to play last night with just one member of my squad. So we ran duos. I updated. It was the first time I played games in a few weeks now. We got 2 dubs. It was a lot of fun. The game mechanics are great. Fortnite is still, esports aside, Fortnite is still one of the best games I think that's been created in recent memory. The skins, just the cars in the game, the way they have like these LED lit rooms now. It's so much fun. The when you dive in and you kind of have the different sky effects, they do everything so well. The music, I just can't compliment it enough as a game, not as a business that we criticize often and then we kind of pick apart here for fun and putting on our tinfoil hats and wondering why they're doing this and that. But played non-building mode. They made it permanent. I read yesterday on Tuesday of this week, the week of, so that was March 29th. We had a lot of fun. I think it's back in the rotation. It took a while to remember the controls. It took a while to remember the aiming, which is always a little different. Unfortunately for you, Paul, I think a lot of people are going to go back to controller now because the benefit of keyboard mouse was for the building. I am loyal to keyboard and mouse, as you know, but my duo said he started playing controller halfway through the night because he said, "What's the point?" I said, "Aiming." But you know how it
Some
goes.
of the best takes, and I clipped them in our Discord, which, by the way, everyone should join. Discord.gg/metatv. I took clips from XQC stream where he was talking about controller and he was playing Fortnite and talking about controller on Fortnite. And I think his take was the best. It shouldn't be there, right? It shouldn't even be an option. It makes no sense why you have the computer aiming for you, but I get it. When you're not very good at games, you need that crutch. And so, I understand why some people less skilled than I may need that crutch. It's just, that's the unfortunate reality. Not everyone can be as good as me at these games. So on that note, though, I will say, perfect segue. We do have an amazing guest today. I don't want to waste too much time. I want to get to him. We have an amazing guest. We have none other than Brandon Hoffman, who is the senior investment manager at Samsung Next. They're doing all kinds of cool things around gaming and Web3. Can't wait to talk to him. Brandon, welcome to the Business of Esports podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Most important question, Brandon. Have you played Fortnite without building yet?
I have not without building. Okay. I had jumped into Fortnite, when it first came out. It's been a while since I've actually played, but just for the sake of having that experience, I should probably jump back in.
Probably worth trying. Maybe we got a trio here. There you go. Brandon, for our audience that maybe doesn't know about you or about Samsung Next, would love a little bit of your background, how you got into gaming, why you got into gaming in Web3, and also just some of the cool things you're doing at Samsung Next.
Yeah, sure. So for context, I'll start with Samsung Next just to make that clear. So we're the investment group on behalf of Samsung Electronics. So I think Samsung itself needs little to no introduction.
No, I don't think so.
Cell phones, TV displays, smart home, and appliances. But Samsung Next is focused on the software and services to complement those businesses. And the way that we source innovation, frankly, is from the builders and founders out there creating startups, the next generation across several focus areas that we believe are all relevant for the future of Samsung. And more importantly, their experiences that, consumers of the end user devices would care about. So gaming, for instance, is one of those areas and has long been a focus, but blockchain as well. And more now, things like metaverse, Web3, and a few others. But so personally, I joined Samsung Next about 4 years ago. Before that, I spent a few years on Wall Street. I was at Morgan Stanley in equity research. So I actually covered the internet sector, including gaming. So a lot of the big gaming publishers, I covered them. And I mean, years ago, at the beginning, at least, of an interest of gaming, really was much more on the personal side. So like both of you guys, I would imagine, grew up playing all sorts of games from one console generation to the next. My favorite games were RPGs, so like the Final Fantasy series, for instance. Then dial-up was too slow to be able to have any type of online experience. So we'd go to the local PC cafe and have LAN tournaments of StarCraft and Counter-Strike. And then it was probably like Diablo 2, at the house, whereas my first actual online type of experience, obviously now that was a couple decades ago. That's sort of the beginnings, at least, of my personal gaming journey. But yeah, I've been able to cover it now professionally for years as an investor and on behalf of Samsung. So
very cool, Brandon. I want to dive into this a bit, and I love the gaming background, and I think it'd be so cool to talk a little bit about what is a big company like Samsung, and maybe you personally, what are you most excited about when you're looking at the gaming industry, or what's going on with Web3 and metaverse, or maybe all of the above? What are some of the big themes Samsung's following and then you personally are following?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Samsung at the end of the day, again, we want to really see the ecosystem, right, and see it grow, whether that's gaming as we know it and all of the trends there. But again, I do think that this next leg of gaming tied to blockchain and play to earn, the metaverse, a lot of these new experiences that are still very, very early, right? I mean, especially if you looked at it in comparison to traditional gaming, still very small. But it excites us, especially at Samsung Next, is more so the lens I take, right? So we're more so looking at the future, right? What's going to be the next big thing 10 plus years from now? And so those are a few of the trends and the themes within gaming that we're paying close attention to and the type of investments that we're making in startups.
How much of your investment thesis at Samsung Next is driven by, like, how many more cell phones will this allow us to sell, right? Like, or how many more TVs? Or is it like, are you looking at them in isolation as if they could be new business lines for Samsung? Like, where does that investment thesis fall?
Yeah. So I would say that there's kind of a line between the two. The business units themselves, who are again focused on the devices, right? I think they're looking at opportunities to just enhance that experience for the buyers of those devices. Obviously, it's better if the next time they're going to replace a TV, a device, a phone, they stay within Samsung. And obviously, we believe if we deliver a great experience, that the likelihood of that happening is higher. But as an investment thesis, the more on the Samsung Next side, as an investor, take that into consideration. I mean, what type of opportunity, best case scenario, could a partnership look like with Samsung? But that's not necessarily promised nor required to make an investment. Full stop. I and the team at Samsung Next just want to find the best builders and founders who are creating the future, who are bringing innovation within these focus areas. And so again, with something like gaming, really want to find those who are just disrupting the space, and creating a whole new experience. And so that may very well make its way back to Samsung devices, which would be great. Or again, some of these are early bets, and maybe it won't really pan out, right? Maybe the whole future of gaming won't change in one direction or another, or will surprise us to the upside or downside. But that's the game of venture capital. So that's really the way we're thinking about things.
Would love to dissect two of these initiatives in particular. And Brandon, correct my ignorance here if these are on behalf of Samsung Next as a whole or yours personally, but ones that you and I had spoken of the other night that I wanted to dive into, particularly Bored Ape Yacht Club and Sandbox. What drew you to these companies, to these projects, to these communities? What application do you see them having in the metaverse as that gets built out? Of course, your definition of what you think that looks like, because we're seeing it's not necessarily a Ready Player One element, that there's a lot more nuance to it. But and perhaps we could take these one at a time or collectively, however you'd like to dissect them. But two names that I think everyone is familiar with that listens to half of what they hear coming out of our worlds, and obviously two eye-grabbing projects that would love to have that insight on again what drew you and what caused you guys to invest.
Yeah. No, definitely great question, and two deals I was excited to be able to participate in. Probably, yeah, could take them separately. Could start with the Sandbox. I mean, I think the excitement and interest with the metaverse was probably started a couple of years ago, just naturally, and looking at gaming and what was next. Right, you started to see really these behaviors, right, from gamers and users, that it was more than just about the game, right? Folks would connect online with friends, with others. They would meet new people, but you would even see in some of these, MMOs, for instance, you would see ceremonies, like social kind of gatherings, right? Funerals. You've seen like weddings. You've seen all sorts of these things, which are truly more personal in nature, and you wouldn't think would have a place within these virtual worlds. But that's where, again, behavior is kind of going, right, in the next generation of gamers and users are heading. And so the idea of a metaverse, again, yeah, to your point, I think there's good definitions out there, but I don't know if everybody agrees or everybody's got a slight adaptation. My personal belief, there's not one metaverse in the sense that it's just going to be one winner takes all, and it's going to be this one closed garden. I think the metaverse is one thing, though, one place. Effectively, it's sort of the digital representation of the world and experience. And from one place to the next, one city to the next, one venue to the next, you can have different experiences, right, throughout the real world. I think it's the same in sort of this digital virtual world. But from one virtual world to the next, there's going to be different use cases, different needs, purposes, experiences delivered. The Sandbox is one that just quickly, in the early part of last year, when sort of evaluating the space, it just really stood out. It stood out because of the way that they were going to market. I think Decentraland, right? So now when we think about blockchain, right? So outside of the Minecraft, Fortnite, Roblox, which has already shown, again, the power of kind of these experiences, these virtual worlds. But now when you think about blockchain or decentralized and really just allowing users to truly own now that land, that experience, right? The land from within those walls. Decentraland, I think, was obviously on the forefront years ago, over these last several years, and showed, the demand that's there, the fact that people would want to have experiences in these virtual worlds, and they would want to own them, right? They would own them, they would buy them, sell them. A very vibrant secondary marketplace had taken place. So then when looking at the Sandbox, now like investable opportunities, right, is the lens that we're going to look at. Where could we actually go? And what I loved about the Sandbox actually was they were being very slow and deliberate with how they were even, offloading their land. They were trying to be as inclusive really as possible. It went from thousands to now tens of thousands of landowners, right, who individually own land. The partnerships, and the collaboration from even like the Web 2 world, right? These kind of traditional brands, if you will, or maybe non-endemic brands, right? Participating in this metaverse or this virtual world, and the fact that Sandbox would bring them along, I thought was brilliant in terms of a go-to-market, and again would create sort of this flywheel, right? These assets, these IPs, these communities, but on the same side, individuals and people leaning in, buying, owning, building, playing, within this one world. And then the team. So Sebastian and Arthur, they come from a gaming background, mobile gaming, user-generated content, successful in many regards, like tens of millions of downloads, tens of millions of games created by the users. But their aha moment, effectively, in all of that was those users really didn't monetize, right? They didn't create really a livelihood or anything off of what they had built. I think Roblox had paved the way a good amount, for a generation who's making some of their first dollars, some of these Gen Zs in Roblox. But obviously there's even more that can be done, especially when you decentralize, right? And you go on the blockchain. And so for the Sandbox to sort of pivot in that regard, and bring that tacit knowledge, right, from the last 10 years as game builders, first and foremost, right? They're not just like a couple of crypto guys. They understand what it takes to build a game, a fun game, how to empower users to create content. I just thought it was all powerful, right? So in thinking about all of those aspects, the Sandbox was really, a no-brainer at that point to participate. And again, I'm grateful that we were able to do so.
You mentioned also Bored Ape Yacht Club, Brandon, and I just want to touch on that. I have seen recently the Yuga Labs deck, right, pitch deck, and they just raised $450 million on the back of that pitch. And what struck me was so much of that pitch was about gaming, right? Like they're going to go and create a game, right. And it's not so much about the art anymore. It's turning these into characters basically in a game. And I thought that was interesting because you also mentioned in your intro traditional gaming. You use this word traditional gaming, right? Like almost like we talk about esports and traditional sports. And so on one hand, you have like, call it Roblox and Epic and Microsoft with Minecraft and Activision Blizzard and EA, all what maybe we would call traditional gaming. And on the other hand, you have, potentially Yuga Labs / Bored Ape Yacht Club coming out with their own game. We have Axie Infinity. We have a bunch of play to earn games or sandbox type games, right? That are blockchain based. Where do you think we are going to land 5 years from now or 10 years from now? Do you think the traditional gaming companies are going to start doing, blockchain based games or play to earn games? Or do we think that we'll be talking about them the same way we talk about, football now as a meat sport, traditional sport, not the future, right? Like, how does this play out over the next 5 to 10 years in your mind with sort of the future of gaming versus traditional gaming?
Yeah. It's a great question. Probably the hardest question, admittedly.
But a great question to ask a VC, right? Because this is what you're looking at. You're looking at the future.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I think, so I'll start with the furthest out. I think 10 years from now, I do believe that blockchain-based gaming will make a significant dent. And again, the massive, gaming market. I think it'll be a bumpy road to get there, especially in the near term. As we know, gamers are very vocal, right, with what they want, with what they like, with what they expect. Their expectations are very high on developers and publishers. And, right now, admittedly, like mainstream traditional gaming, things like NFTs, right, and cryptocurrency or digital currencies that aren't like in-game currency, like a Robux and stuff, it's not looked upon favorably by the mainstream gamer, and I think that has to do with the motivation behind it, right? I think um, someone who loves gaming loves a good game. Period. Like the game itself needs to be a great experience. It needs to. It's some of that escapism, right? It's some of that role playing. It's the social dynamics at play. It's the competitive aspect, right? Um, it's not focused on just earning an asset that you can sell and flip or just earning some cryptocurrency, right? And that's not what traditional gaming has been built on, and that's not what people have fallen in love with, right? So I think right now it's just an interesting dichotomy, and that's why it's almost like a start. There's the actual traditional gaming as we know it, and then there's this blockchain based gaming, which is trying things with NFTs for in-game assets or cryptocurrencies in lieu of in-game currencies. Um, I think in the next few years, um, it'll take some time, I would imagine, uh, for it to kind of find its footing in traditional gaming. I think the big publishers and a lot of the big IP will play an important role, right? I think in the near term, again, most will probably be hesitant. They might experiment a bit with something like this, just like any type of new game mechanic, or right, or um, things like loot boxes, even for instance, right? A few years ago was a big thing, right? Eventually, you saw a huge shift, in the way that games monetize, right? Into downloadable content and microtransactions, and a lot of these kind of things, for better or worse. And there's always been moments where gamers again are vocal and against it. But at the end of the day, I think 5 to 10 years from now, as long as good games are being made, maybe it's the current franchises we see today or some new ones, right? So again, Fortnite, for instance, right? Like 10 years ago wasn't a huge a game that you couldn't, not talk about. Now that's the case, right? 10 years from now, there might be new IP that sort of enters, or there might be some current IP that makes its way there. I do think at the end of the day, if you strip away sort of the financial gains, right, and the incentives and the flipping and speculation and all that kind of stuff, um, it does seem like it would just be a better experience. And so that's just my personal bias, right? If I go back to uh, 20 years ago version of myself playing Diablo 2, like I would grind and build up characters and then sell them on a pseudo gray market, effectively sell my account,
Yep.
or some of these like these assets, right? These weapons, these accessories, right? These rings, like there's almost a little micro economy within games, and we've seen that, and it's grown into a massive business. Um, Trying to do a hard transition into a whole new kind of mechanism, right, of cryptocurrencies and NFTs will feel unnatural. It'll be unfamiliar, and so again, I think gamers like what they like. They know what they like, and anything different, there's going to be some resistance. But if at the end of the day, you grinding for 120 hours in whatever game and accumulating, assets, currencies, accessories, building up an avatar, right, or a player, and you truly having ownership of that, right, and the ability at that point, the agency over that to sell it or trade it or do anything, rent it out, and actually get some passive income because someone wants to parachute in and play a game at a, starting level of 85, that took you, again, 100 hours to grind up to. That just seems like, for me at least, as a consumer, a better experience, something a little more ideal. But, but it's gonna be a lot different than what we're used to now. So
how aware do you think are the big, because you followed the big gaming companies, right, as an analyst, how aware are they of, like, how well do they understand Web3, blockchain, play to earn? Like, do they all get it and they're being very careful on purpose? Do you think maybe they don't get it? Where do you think their heads are at collectively?
Yeah. I think from one publisher to the next, again, in terms of how they manage IP is just drastically different. Some you see are more willing to partner, right, and leverage that IP in different forums. Some they're extremely guarded, right, extremely guarded. And again, will be very conservative, I'm sure, right, and before testing anything.
Yeah.
In terms of awareness, I think at this point, right, especially after last year, 2021, you can't ignore cryptocurrency and NFTs. I mean, you just can't. It's so apparent, right? The billions of dollars of activity. So they're aware of it, to what degree they are going to have a comfort with the technology itself, or how gaming, like development itself and the mechanics, are going to be tied into it. What experience should be on and off chain? Those are a lot of like technical questions and things that they would need to figure out, especially at their scale, right? But in terms of being aware of it, I do believe that they're all aware of it. You see Ubisoft, for instance, be a little more willing than others, perhaps. Crafton, right, of PUBG, even just recently announced, right, so they're going to be leaning into Solana, the Solana ecosystem. And that's pretty big, right? I mean,
so do you think like a Gabe Newell and Valve, he's come out and he said, I'm paraphrasing obviously, but like NFTs are all basically just a scam, and he doesn't want any play to earn or blockchain based games on Steam. Do you think he's going to end up, what I'm hearing is you think he's going to end up on the wrong side of history and Steam will never have these games there despite maybe their popularity in the future? Or do you think some of these attitudes turn around?
I would say, again, if we're back to the 5-year mark, 5 years from now, I think a good amount of those attitudes, Valve included, I think would need to reconsider, their positioning. Again, at the end of the day, gamers and users, right, of these experiences, of the content, they're going to dictate what happens, right? So really the question is, what will people want? What will gamers want, right? And so there's already proof that millions, but again, that's small compared to the billions who play games inclusive of like mobile. It's very early innings, but millions have shown an interest, at least, right, in this new type of experience, this new model, effectively. Whether that's virtual land, whether that's Axie Infinity, which really put like play to earn on the map. Whether that's buying things like Boardix, which by themselves, had little utility other than maybe social, kind of within a Discord or some real life experiences. Didn't really have much of a gaming aspect until they even dropped a mobile game, kind of, again, sort of a pilot version, but it was pretty engaging. It was pretty fun, and that's probably early innings for them as well. And so when and if enough gamers, start to want this, then I think big platforms and big publishers will give it to them.
So there's a couple of themes that you've brought up here that I want to pick at, because one, community and culture, which we keep revisiting, not just with some of the communities that you guys have invested in, but in the way that you evaluate gaming as a whole and these trends. But also you had referenced loot boxes, right, in the public scrutiny or perspective of that technology when that was first released. And again, tying this into Samsung Next in your investment portfolio and how you evaluate these innovative, cutting edge softwares and technologies that do have some type of overlap or intersection with your technology from Samsung proper. Curious now, when you look at these startups at these different companies, is it a matter of culture? Is it a matter of liability and legality? Is it a matter, and again, I understand there's going to be a weight, some type of weight applied to each of these different considerations, but I'm trying to get that understanding from you of how you weigh culture against liability, against perhaps maybe someone that's pre-seed or seed, or they're only asking for a certain amount of money that is more tolerable to where you guys like to get involved. But what would make, I suppose, any one of these communities, any startup, any innovative emerging company, many of which listen, what would make them attractive to you?
Yeah, great question. I mean, definitely depends, right? Depends on the stage. So you brought up stage as an example. There are some, not necessarily announced, so without any names, but just an archetype here. There's some pre-seed, right? Very very early investments that we have made or will make, and a lot of times there, what you're underwriting is the team, right? The founders themselves, and their ability to potentially execute, right? I mean, really, you're betting on the potential, that they haven't yet tapped into or manifested, right? Which is very difficult. Betting on human potential, right? Trying to foresee that comes from really just getting to know them in the diligence process, right? Understanding how they think, what they're driven by, motivated by, the vision that they see, as well as like more of an execution aspect. Are they thinking methodically of many steps ahead as to how they would actually deliver on that vision, right? So having that grand vision, but also being able to kind of take it one step at a time is a difficult, set of skills to even juggle, right? But some of the best founders out there have those. So if it's extremely early, those are effectively the nuances taken into consideration for an investment, and obviously then the vision that they're painting, whether it's something we think is novel, right? It's something we'd want to be behind, we'd want to be associated with. So obviously, you mentioned like a liability aspect. Before anything's really been done, I guess you wouldn't really know whether there's a potential liability. Obviously, if it seems like it's a gray area or something aggressively that might be sort of out of bounds, and maybe we don't want to be associated, especially then we're protecting our brand, right? We obviously wouldn't want Samsung associated with anything we didn't believe in or we didn't think we should be associated with. And so that's on the earlier stage. But, for instance, again, Sandbox, right, and Yuga Labs were brought up. Amazing team and vision, but there's also, it's been a relatively short period of time in Web3, though. 1 year in Web3, it feels like a lifetime. But there's actual numbers, to back it up. There's some metrics. There's some a very just strong amount of engagement that you've seen from the community, right? So this ties to culture. It's undeniable, I would say, that Yuga Labs at this point hasn't affected the culture, right? It hasn't driven culture forward a bit. There are some people out there, perhaps at this point, who still have never heard of an NFT, let alone a Bored Ape. But I think that's becoming a very, very smaller pool. Whether they understand the mechanics or own one or even own any crypto, maybe not. But somehow or another, right? Yuga Labs and the Bored Ape Yacht Club project, right? The NFT collection was able to do that, and that's just kind of lightning in a bottle, right? That's just like creation of a brand, a movement of sorts. And so you see that with the social engagement, with the activity, with the volumes, right? I mean, billions in volume just within their IP, including now, especially CryptoPunks or Meebits, right? There's clearly supply and demand aspects at play, right? Within this small but fast growing digital economy, that's NFTs and crypto as we know it. So some of those numbers are just staggering. Again, like what this will look like 10 years from now, admittedly, nobody knows. Paul, as you said, that's our job to imagine what it could be, even in the 1% scenario that it is something huge, right? It is the next $100 billion or $1 trillion company, right? A decade from now. That's an outlier, scenario worth betting on and wanting to be a part of. So again, from a brand, culture, movement, aspect, again, both of those properties are just forces within the space, and we were proud to have Samsung associated.
Jimmy, I don't know if you had another follow-up question, but I had one that I wanted to get to before I get to your cross-examination here. But a lot of times people reach out to me, and one of the questions I get most often is am I too late? Right? Like, I'm hearing about all this stuff now, about gaming, about esports, about Web3, about NFTs, you name it, right? Like all metaverse, all these big themes we're talking about. And the feeling, I think for a lot of people is, well, I'm hearing about it everywhere now, so I must be too late, right? Where do you think we are from a life cycle standpoint, both from maybe dollars invested and total hype, right? Are we still early, do you think? Are we peak? Are we past peak, right? Like where on the curve do you think is Web3, metaverse, blockchain-based gaming? Where are we on that curve?
And a quick anecdote to that, Paul, before we turn it over to you, Brandon, because I want to hear how it influences your answer. But to that point, a regular listener of ours and a good friend of mine, Michael from Austin, I won't go into more details, showed me Bored Apes when they were trading around $50,000 an ape, right? And to this question, I said, that's no way goes higher than that. Like I've already missed it. I'm too late. And obviously, we know it went on quite the tear afterwards. So certainly missed out there. And kind of funny to see how it's exploded beyond wildest expectations, I think. But I just wanted to add that anecdote where I felt I was too late about, what was that, a year ago or more, and curious how, again, to Paul's point, where are we in this life cycle? What can we expect?
Yeah. I think first, what matters is setting your expectations with regard to your time frame, right? So if you're expecting to flip some of these things 10x in 1 week or whatever it might be, clearly those are not or they're not, it's not going to be easy expectations to meet, but never say never, especially with some brand new project. But again, some of these that have already been fairly established, such as Bored Apes, right? Do I think it's going to 10x in a week? No, it won't. Some other drop out there where 1 out of 100 drops might do that, perhaps. But from a risk reward standpoint, that's a whole different profile, right? So, but in terms of taking a longer term view, right, thinking about over the next few years, right? I mean, at least I'll speak on behalf of myself. I mean, for the most part, when and if I'm going to put some of my personal money into anything, right? I'm either one, I acknowledge that it's so uncertain and new that I'm prepared to lose it, and or it's something I'm comfortable with holding, expecting that it's going to be volatile because it's probably an asset class or something that's proven to be just that, right? So you need to be prepared for that. Otherwise, it's easy to get scared once it moves in the near term down a bit. You sell, and then it does 10x right over the next few years. So first, it's just sort of that mindset. But I think if you have that mindset, right, and that type of time frame in mind, I do think that there's a ton of opportunity in this space looking ahead. I think year over year, right, there's obviously been amazing gains depending on one token, or coin to the next, or one NFT project to the next. Some are looking at 100x, maybe even 1,000x. Those are rare. Is that going to happen again year over year? Maybe not. But a 10x after that, for instance, is still very possible, right? I think a lot of times, again, there's sort of this recency bias that's just so strong. And it always feels like, if it recently moved up this much, then it can't and won't move up some more, right? Same thing on the way down, right? Anybody who tries to short, you see it fell 50%, it's not going to fall more, but it falls another 50, it falls another 50. And that's how, taking a step back, you see how some of these things have gone, peak to trough down 90 something percent, 50, 50, 50, 50, that's just how the math works. Same thing with stocks. I mean, look at FANG stocks, again, like a 5 to 10 year kind of period, right? The movements that they had from 1 year to the next, there was always more to be gained, but a lot of people just kind of stayed on the sidelines. And sometimes even the market as a whole, right? They say, oh, we've been in a bull market X number of years, right? Since the financial crisis, I'm going to wait it out. And they were saying that 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and clearly they generally just continue to miss. So like my other rule of thumb is just don't try to time the market and don't stay out of it, right? Like you need to always have some position within any market that you want to have, some type of, exposure to, right? So if you want to have some exposure to NFTs or cryptocurrencies, I think get the right mindset, figure out what amount you should put in and put it in really, and then be prepared to hold. So
Brandon, what's sort of adjacent to this? What's the one big publisher or traditional gaming company you think that's going to win biggest over the next 5 to 10 years that will sort of adapt to this future the best? Maybe adapt their IP the best. Like, who's the one you would bet on? Which of the big gaming companies or publishers specifically, obviously, would you put your money on?
Who will win specifically in a blockchain-based gaming world?
Yeah. Wish I had the Jeopardy theme here.
I was thinking like a heartbeat. A heartbeat would be good to be playing.
It's a good question. I mean, at this point, I would say, just in general, Microsoft, right? As a player in this space and what they are willing to do to win, right? The risk they're willing to take, the capital they're willing to put forth, the war chest they still have, the leadership that they have, the forward thinking, like just the vision that they have at the top, at the highest level. And they understand how to fill gaps, right? Like content had long been kind of a gap of theirs, right? I mean, they had the distribution on the Xbox ecosystem. They had the infrastructure from Azure, right, on the cloud side. But continuing to like double and triple down, right, on something like content and IP, which many would look at as a pretty risky, it's a hit-driven business. It could be, is that the best use of our capital? And to see them willing to, again, double, triple down, Activision Blizzard, like after, again, spending billions upon billions on other studios and publishers and developers. The fact that they have all of that, I think at least shows the right type of thinking and willingness, again, from a risk-reward kind of standpoint, what they might be willing to do. So I'd be curious to see how they are positioned and whether they end up winning versus maybe the EAs, the Take-Twos of the world. But we'll see.
I love that answer. I agree also. A little bit. And they talked a lot about metaverse in the announcement of the acquisition. I mean, they did spend a lot of time talking about it. That brings us, guys,
exactly
to everyone's favorite new segment, Judge Jimmy's cross-examination. Brandon, this is where you're going to get five or so, maybe not exactly five, a few rapid fire questions, trying to dive a little bit deeper into who you are as a person, as a business person, as a gamer. Judge Jimmy, take it away.
All right, Brandon, real quick for you, a couple questions. First one, and you touched on this in your intro, but got to know, what is the number one all-time favorite video game of yours?
Final Fantasy VII.
Ooh. I don't think we've had that one.
It's a good one.
It is a good one. All right, Brandon, next question. When you're gaming, what is your go-to snack or drink?
This is going to be horrible. I'm probably drinking carbonated water, which isn't too bad, some sparkling water, but a junk food is probably like goldfish.
Goldfish and some Perrier.
First time I've heard the goldfish answer, though. That's interesting.
I've got kids, so, it tends to be around the house, and you can't stop.
Next question. What is your favorite TV show or movie that shares IP with a video game?
I'd say The Witcher.
Witcher's been great. That's a fan favorite around here. Couldn't have said had
so
a better
many people
answer,
answered Arcane, and I think The Witcher is the better show.
Arcane was great, but The Witcher, I was very surprised and can't wait to get more.
All right, taking a bit of a risk on this last one. It's been hit and miss, and I'm going to broaden it to 2 categories here. Feel free to answer both if you have an answer, or choose your favorite one. First part, what is your favorite, or who is your favorite Ninja Turtle? Second part, who is your favorite Power Ranger? Which color? Not everyone watches these shows. You wouldn't believe it.
It's a dated reference, so I could imagine. But I'm old enough. Raphael.
Nice.
And this is a trick. The Green Ranger when he joined.
When he was
evil as a Green Ranger, but they converted him, right? And then
later he became White Ranger, right?
Yeah,
he became White.
He did go to White, so he wasn't one of the 5. Tommy was his name.
Tommy, that's it.
He was kind of an anti-hero for a while,
you know. He was the first anti-hero, I think.
Sort of joined the good side, you know. But as a kid, you couldn't help but like him.
This is an obscure reference, but did you ever notice how he had the way better suit than everyone else? Everyone else just had like the plain, but he had the whole thing. He had
Brandon, that was 100% as far as I'm concerned. I'm giving it back to you, Paul. I couldn't be happier with how that went.
Brandon, thank you so much, of course, for being here. If people want to find you, follow you, find out more about what Samsung Next is doing, or maybe some of the companies you're investing in, or maybe send you pitches, I don't know. How can people find you or follow you?
Yeah, sure. 2 best places, maybe 3. LinkedIn. So just look up Brandon Hoffman at Samsung. Right now, my profile pic is a mutant ape. So it's probably even easier to find on LinkedIn. There's not many who are bold enough to do so. But you'll see that same profile pic on Twitter. So bhoff, or the handle is 0x bhoff, BHOFF, or Telegram. I'm actually on Telegram on pretty much all my devices, and that's where a lot of Web3 communities, or just individual kind of DMs kind of happen there, and at bhoff.
Very cool. I love what you're doing, Brandon, and I think you and Samsung Next are in some really great companies building a lot of what the future of gaming and metaverse and Web3 is going to be. So very cool to follow you and see what you're up to. And thank you so much for being on the show. Jimmy, thank you as always. To our listeners and our viewers, just a quick reminder, guys, Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Don't miss our live show. It's broadcast everywhere you find our content. Make sure to follow Business of Esports everywhere, on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, on literally every single platform you can find Business of Esports or Biz Esports. And as always, guys, don't forget, the future is fun. We will see you next week.